You are listening to Prevention is the New Cure, all things health and NHS with a political twist.
And that's with me, Dr. Helen Stokes-Lampard, and Steve Bryan, former MP and chair of the Health Select Committee. Hi.
Hello, Helen. Nice to see you. This is episode 32. My goodness, time is flying, isn't it? Last time we were talking about the forthcoming general election, and later on this week, postal votes come out. So it's cracking on, isn't it? We're movements of the current government of the last 14 years and having a look at the infected blood inquiry. And it just doesn't that seem like a long, long time ago?
I know, it's been a crazy couple of weeks. I got home just in time to record the podcast a short time ago, and there was a notification that my postal votes will be arriving in the next few days and to keep an eye out for them. I always think it's nice they tell me that they're going to post something to me. So anyway, it's very strange.
Yeah.
And a couple of party political advertising leaflets. So at least I now know who some of my candidates are.
Oh, so you get them, do you? See, I don't get them because they screen me out because I was the MP, so I never get the leaflets from the opposition. Or actually, I haven't had any from my own party either.
Well, they haven't had long to prepare, in fairness.
Anyway, yeah. Well, there you go.
So, Steve, I'm reckoning it must be a very weird time for you right now. When we spoke last time, you had, it just all happened. You were just stepping down, stepping back. How are you feeling?
Yeah, it's weird not campaigning. Really weird not being out there. I mean, I have been out a couple of times with my hoped for successor, and but it's totally different when you're canvassing for somebody else. It kind of quite nice, really. You just turn up, get given the task, and then just go and do it, and then you go home again. You don't have to, it's not your neck on the block. And I keep seeing people who say to me, I did Politics Live earlier on the BBC, and I saw Jonathan Ashworth. He's a Labour MP, Labour Shadow, used to be Shadow Health Secretary, actually, and he's a good friend, and he said, "You look different. You look relaxed." I don't know about that, but anyway.
Interestingly,
yes.
Jonathan came and spent a day in my surgery. He did it all very discreetly when he was Shadow Health Secretary. There was no fanfare, he didn't score any political points, but he just wanted to see what it was like on the front line. It was about 9 or 10 months later when he came out and he spoke about it, which is why I can now speak about it. But I really respected him for doing that. He really wanted to understand. Anyway.
Yeah, nice guy. I used to do that when I was the primary care minister, actually. Amazing how many people said they were fine for the minister to sit in their consultation.
Yeah, it is amazing.
Only one person went behind the curtain, and I clearly didn't follow there. But I used to do that. Anyway, loads of stuff coming up today. We're going to talk about Michael Mosley, talk about prostate cancer, talk about E. coli. It's Men's Health this week. So Men's Health Week this week. So we have a guest related to that, and we'll talk about that later on. But anyway, back to the top. Over to you.
So now look, it's Men's Health Week, which is fantastic. And I think the hashtag for Men's Health Week 24 is Let's Talk Prostate and everything else men's health. The Men's Health Forum is the main charity that supports this initiative, but obviously there are lots of charities in this space. And the reason for the focus this year is because the King, of course, King Charles III, earlier this year shared that he had a problem with an enlarged prostate, which of course we know led to treatment and a slight reduction in his appearances, although he seems to be back and looking extremely well at the moment. But what interested me was on the day after his announcement, there were 16,400 visits to the NHS relevant website and massive number of visits to the Prostate Cancer UK, who've got a really good online risk checker. It's like a 30-second thing you just click on, answer a few questions, and they tell you what the chances are of you having prostate cancer. And those use went up massively. I would recommend people do it. So honest sharing helps.
Yeah, really interesting. And I know people who've actually done that test. And I also saw that there was reporting last week, so 1st of June, which was last week, wasn't it? Saliva tests carried out at home are better at identifying men who are at high risk of prostate cancer than the standard PSA blood test. This is new research that's been carried out by the ICR, so the Institute of Cancer Research, and the Royal Marsden, where Kelly Palmer, of course, is in residence. They say they hope the findings will, quote, turn the tide on prostate cancer. And normally we sort of publish a link, don't we? But it hasn't yet been published in any of the specialist journals. But I just thought that was really interesting and another tool in the box for you GPs.
Absolutely. And I mean, trying to get anybody in for blood tests can be a drag. I have to say, men seem to be a little more reluctant. I think because women have to have lots of blood tests when they get pregnant and go through childbirth, they seem to be less reticent to come in and have a needle stuck in their arm. I've no idea why people don't want a needle stuck in their arms, but there we are.
Yes, yes. Well, I could tell you, but anyway. So basically, what happens is, so poo in the post has obviously been transformational in terms of
Yeah,
bowel cancer, and this will be a tube. You'll put your
yeah,
saliva and your
spit
sample
in a
into it,
tube.
and you'll post it off.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, let's just hope that it does meet the threshold for it being adopted into the NHS in due course. I think my understanding is it's still at trial stage, but trials are looking good. Let's keep fingers and toes crossed on that one.
Yeah. Now we're going to talk about Michael Mosley,
Oh,
Dr.
Steve.
Mosley. What an awful story that is.
Isn't it heartbreaking? I think we were all on tenterhooks, and I didn't know Dr. Michael Mosley personally, but I know a lot of media doctors, and they were very close to him. And he was I mean, hugely respected by everyone, but he was genuinely loved. He was a warm, intelligent, funny guy who he was transformative in how he helped us talk about weight, how he helped us talk about all sorts of health matters. He just made it so accessible. A brilliant communicator and a dedicated researcher.
Yeah, one of your own, really, wasn't he? And heartbreaking how close he was to safety, which I sort of family say that they've held that onto that. When I
Mm.
was at the end of last year, I think in November, I don't know if you remember, horrible virus. I was really laid up for a couple of
Mm.
weeks, really, and
Whoa.
really knocked me horizontal. And I don't sleep well at the best of times. But anyway, when I was in bed at that time, I found these brilliant podcasts that Michael did around sleep, and
Oh,
I remember listening to them then, and he was really, really good, really
yeah.
helpful. I mean, he had quite a nice doctor's bedside manner voice anyway,
Yes.
which was not unhelpful, but I thought that was really helpful. And I heard Tom Watson, the former MP
Oh,
Tom Watson,
yes.
on the media the other day talking about Michael and how he helped him turn the tide on his type 2 diabetes, which he'd done a lot on, hadn't he?
He had, and yeah, and actually, Tom is somebody we could try and get on the podcast sometime because he's really turned his life around by big changes. I know he's no longer an MP, but he's a really interesting guy, and in fact, he's incredibly supportive of the work we did in social prescribing and setting up the National Academy of Social Prescribing. Anyway,
Indeed. Oh, well, I know Tom. I shall ask him.
that's a great idea. So, look, our huge condolences to Michael Mosley's family. I guess from a medical and prevention point of view, extreme heat is very serious. I mean, Michael knew that. He was fit, he was medically trained, he was intelligent, and it still got to him. The dangers of severe dehydration and extreme heat cannot be underestimated. It's coming up to holiday season. People heading off to particularly hot countries where temperatures are in excess of 40 degrees. Please be kind to yourselves, take it seriously, stay in the shade more at very high sun factor, and if in doubt, don't go out in the really stinking hot parts of the day, please.
Yeah, yeah. Well, our best wishes to his family. And we were just going to talk about before we introduce the guest, talk about E. coli, a story that you've spotted.
Yeah, so E. coli is a really potentially nasty bug that causes severe gastroenteritis. So, diarrhea, vomiting, and so on. In fact, bloody diarrhea in many cases. And there's been this horrible cluster of over 113 proven cases all over the UK. And they now suspect it's related to a food item something that's been disseminated all around the country through lots of supermarkets, because it's not like a close-knit cluster of people who know each other. These are completely unconnected people.
Yeah, because wasn't there an outbreak in the new year, Lancashire somewhere, that we talked about it at the time, didn't we?
We
But yeah, it's a nasty, nasty business, isn't it? And as you say, it's all over the UK. And I think the youngest affected is sort of 2 years old, and the oldest is 79 years old. So it's not discriminating, is it?
It's not discriminating, and then normally it's related to sort of waterborne transmission. But the reason I think it's food related is because of this geographical crazy spread and the lack of connection between people. Um, I think, I mean, it has been connected to food in the past. There was bags of salad a few years ago. There was quite a scare about. So there was a lot of, reminder, pre-prepared salads, make sure you wash them and so on. My GP brain, I have to say, Steve, has been thinking that for all these cases that are proven, I'm sure there'll be loads of other undiagnosed cases. So a lot of people
Yeah.
just don't go, people who are generally fit and well and can get through it, don't see their GP or don't get tested. So I suspect this is tip of the iceberg stuff.
I
So
knew salad would be to blame. The answer to this is don't eat salad.
well,
Um,
it might not be salad, it could be something else.
do you know when I digress quickly here. When we were having the tasting thing for before our wedding. You know, when you meet
Mm,
the
very
caterer and
nice.
they
Yeah.
bring some dishes for you to taste and what have you. We had it in a marquee at my parents-in-law house, and the lady who did our wedding breakfast, as it's called, isn't it? She bought some peas, and I said, whatever you do, I don't want peas. I just don't trust them. And she looked at me and she said, of all the years I've done this, Mr. Bryan, no one has ever said they don't trust a food type. But I don't trust the way peas move on the plate.
Oh, Steve,
Anyway,
you're a suspicious
I
son,
have
aren't
got a
you?
suspicious mind when it comes to peas. Anyway, I've
Oh,
never liked them. Anyway,
moving on.
yeah, down that one. So thank you for that. Shall we take a break and then introduce a really lovely guest?
I think that's a great idea because let's have plenty of time to talk to him.
Welcome back. It's Men's Health Week this week, as referred to earlier, and we're going to touch on a really sad subject now, but one that really needs to be talked about. So, we did an inquiry on the select committee, Helen, as you know,
Yeah.
on men's health. We didn't actually get to finish it because of the way that Parliament ended so abruptly, he says bitterly.
Frustrating.
Yeah, it's frustrating. But one of the things that I did in the lead up to that inquiry was talk to a group called the Men's Health Forum, who were helping us with the inquiry. And there were all sorts of men's health charities that were taking part in that forum that day. One of them was a really interesting charity called the Robbing Cancer Trust. And Toby Freeman from the Robbing Cancer Trust is joining us now. And they work to raise awareness of testicular cancer and germ cell cancer linked to testicular and ovarian cancer. And that is as far as I will go in introducing it. But hello, Toby. Welcome to the podcast.
And a huge hello
Thank
from
you
me,
so much for
Toby.
having me.
Yeah, thanks ever
Hello,
so much
hello.
for coming on this week. Lovely to meet you. Come on.
Lovely,
Great
tell
to
us-
see you,
lovely to
mate.
be here. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much. Like the cap, like the baseball cap, looking good, looking cooler than either of us. Tell
True.
us, why did you form this charity, Toby?
Yeah, so this takes us back to 2011, and I'm a much younger man then, 21, and my older brother Rob is 23. Now, Rob was very fit, healthy, active, didn't smoke, didn't drink, was always at the gym, basically annoyingly fit and healthy as his younger brother, I have to admit, and handsome to boot. But he suddenly got signs and symptoms and was telling us about them, and we decided, Rob, you really need to get to the doctors. And unbeknownst to us, but he'd been having fatigue, night sweats, and just this cough that wouldn't go away. As a young man, just thought these are just normal signs and symptoms, like some winter cold. It could be just anything I can just brush off. I'm young, I'm fit, I'm invincible. Unfortunately, when he was taken into the doctors and then up to the hospital and admitted, we found out that he had a grapefruit-sized tumor in his chest. So he had a stage 4 mediastinal germ cell tumor. So a germ cell is a cell that makes up the reproductive organs in the testes and the ovaries. Rob's was a testicular cell that never made its way down, and it had grown in the cavity in his chest, and unfortunately was a very poor prognosis by the time they found it. So Rob went from the prime of his life to being a cancer patient at 23, and then through 10 months of grueling chemotherapy and treatments. And unfortunately, there was nothing more they could do for him. And we lost him in the December of that year. And we thought, if someone as conscious, fit, active, and healthy as Rob, and to give you an idea of how how health conscious he was the only person I ever knew who checked his testicles. He'd been to the doctors and had a scan, and he'd had a cyst, very normal. He was just that guy. And he missed these signs and symptoms over this time. We thought if he can miss them, then anyone can. So we decided to really focus on young people and awareness and just breaking down any of that stigma and embarrassment. And that was where the idea for the Robbing Cancer Trust was born.
Wow, Toby, I'm so
grown.
sorry to hear about that. And I mean, the robbingcancertrust.org is your website, and there's a really beautiful video on there that you and your parents made about Rob, and it's a really lovely tribute and tells the story. Helen, it's a horrible story, isn't it? But something positive's coming out of this in the work that Toby's doing.
Well, germ cell cancers, especially this type that actually don't present in the testicles. I mean, in the testicles, because so for men who self-examine, at least you can feel lumps generally. So, you know, the classic message is get to know your own. Same applies for breast
Absolutely.
lumps and tumors. But ovarian cancer is very hard to diagnose because the ovaries are buried deep inside and you can't feel your own ovaries and therefore often present late. But this presentation where there was no testicular mass, so presented in the chest, I mean, that is really rare and awful.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to hear it, Toby. So did the GP immediately pick up on it and get you to A&E, or was it?
No.
Because it's a hard one to diagnose.
Yeah, very much so. And obviously, there's no blame here, just learnings. But
Yeah.
Rob was told he probably had a virus to come back if it hadn't gone away. Actually, the reason we took him up to hospital was because he had a red, swollen, painful arm the next morning, which actually turned out to be a blood clot. So a
Oh my
piece of the
gosh.
tumor had
Yeah.
broken off. So that was he was diagnosed through A&E, quick tumor marker test, and they were like, "We need to admit you." And then
Chest
a
X-ray.
week in hospital, chest X-rays, just finalising the diagnosis, and we were pulled into a little side room, as too many people have been. So it was, no testicular primary. It was in his
So
chest.
that is super, super rare. But as a healthcare professional, anyone listening in, I mean, it's important to remember that rare things do occur. I mean, and it is that kind of, when you exclude the common, then you have to think rare. Wow, what a
Even
story.
in young people, and I think that's the important one. The you're too young for cancer doesn't exist, right? That's not.
And Toby, you said to me in your original email, I'm particularly focused on testicular cancer awareness, education and support. I want to educate, engage, and empower young men to drive better health outcomes. And I mean, that's a mission statement, isn't it? So what does the charity been up to over the last 10 years, and what is it doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So it started with Rob. Rob was our primary focus, and now it's all about all these other people that we can help. And that's been a beautiful transition as a small charity. But we have three main pillars of what we do. So our awareness is online, lots of social media, lots of online working with trying to use influencers and get out there and do really silly, big, brash campaigns like send a pair of testicles into space, a virtual world record for getting the most people on a Zoom call to check themselves, and creating a giant pair of testicles on Europe's biggest digital billboard. We have our educational campaign, which is in schools, businesses, colleges, universities, all across the UK, either virtual or in person. So that's either our staff team, myself or Darren, or our ambassadors going out and delivering these talks to young people.
So this is the Talking Bollocks tour, basically.
This is the Talking Bollocks. Yeah,
excellent.
Talking Bollocks campaign. We all talk bollocks. We need to check them. Is the general.
And how does that go down? I mean,
we thought it was a perfect British statement.
It is, isn't it? I was telling Helen recently. I mean, I'm sure you're aware that last month Chris Hellinger died, who founded Copperfield, the breast cancer charity. And I once took Chris to a group of schools in my former constituency in Winchester, and she talked to the gathered assemblies about breast health, and it was just incredible to watch the young people who were obviously too cool for school when the assembly started, and when she opened up by telling them that she's got terminal breast cancer as this young, beautiful blonde woman, you could have heard a pin drop. And how does it go when you do your Talking Bollocks tour with schools around the country?
Very similarly. So Chris and Copperfield have been a massive inspiration for us,
I'm sure,
and have supported us for a long time as well. So shout out to them. But it's a very similar process. We go out on stage. I give my talk. Obviously, the bombshell at the end is I lost my brother. Darren does his talk, and Darren is actually a 22-year testicular cancer survivor. So he does his talk and then says, this is why this is so important to me. And obviously our ambassadors do something similar because they tend to be people that have been affected by testicular cancer too. But there's nothing better than either going out on stage with a giant pair of bollocks around your head, because we have these giant stand-in signs, really make everyone laugh. It's humor. Make everyone laugh. You've broken the ice. Yeah. And you get the head teacher or the PE teacher, the really cocky ones, to come up on stage and check themselves, basically. We have these big dangly pair of testicles that our partners at Billy's Ball Bags give us, and they're really funny. And again, it's just a very serious message with a lot of silliness, because, the idea is not everyone is going to go away and check themselves. We know that. But when you finally come to it, you're never going to forget the day that weirdo came into your school with a giant pair of bollocks on his head, or got the head teacher to check themselves, or, your English teacher. and it's just going to make you laugh, and you're going to, oh, I remember those, it was talky bollocks. And then you can find us. You go on social media, you go on the internet, you'll find us, and the information is all there. So awareness is a slow drip, but it's just teaching life skills, right? Get it young, learn it throughout your life.
Awareness through humor is so important, because it's hard getting cut through with younger people, because I mean they respond best to peer influences generally.
Yes.
But humor is sort of, you know, as much as we like to think that we're young at heart, actually to somebody who's, you know, who's 15, 16, 14, actually even somebody in the 20s and 30s seems ancient, and let alone people like Steve and I, who, my gosh, we're grandparent age to them. Sorry, Steve.
Thank you.
He loves it when I make him feel old. But actually, if you bring humor in, then you're much more relatable. I mean, so your ovarian cancer side of things, I mean, did I pick up on this? You're not overreacting.
Yes, absolutely. Again, another pun.
It's lovely. I mean, it hasn't got the rude words like bollocks in it, but overreacting is a lovely pun. It's great.
Yeah, and again, it's similar. It's very brash. It's in your face. We have big sweary ovaries. You know, they're angry because they're not being listened to.
Angry
it's
ovaries,
all about,
I like it.
Exactly. It's just using imagery and humor to break down those first barriers, because we see it all the time. University students, especially freshers, out on their own for the first time, you know, navigating the world, just want a few freebies, and we're there, big testicles, angry ovaries. If you can make them laugh, then they're instantly engaged. They're like, all the walls come down. They're like, okay, you got me. At least tell me what you're doing. And that's all we need. 10, 20, 30 seconds to quickly hand something over, and that could save your life. Just go on your way. It's fine. You'll find us when you need us. And it's just that little icebreaker. It's so much fun.
Amazing. So what's next for the charity? What's the plan? Anything particular this week with Men's Health Week? And then what's the plan the next year or two?
Just pushing our messages. We're just in a period of growth at the moment, which is very exciting. Lots of hiring and expanding, but we want to take our team up to a more regional approach. So we're very small, very dedicated, and we've scaled everything we can. Everything we do is scalable nationally, virtually, but nothing beats that in person, especially with the education. So we're looking at funding, and we're sort of on the cusp waiting for a few things that might be coming in to expand to regions where we know no one is delivering any of that in-person, schools, businesses, colleges, universities, in you know, areas of health deprivation, I suppose you'd call them. We want to be able to reach everyone. Our remit is awareness for all. So our job is very simple, you know, listen to your body, check yourself if you can, go to your doctors straight away. We need to make that information accessible to all audiences, whether they're, you know, whether that's educational needs or people that might be hard of hearing, you know, LGBT. We need to be reaching absolutely everyone with that message. And that's what we want to achieve as a charity.
And do you have any sort of part of you? Sorry, Steve, look, I'll hand over to you now. But it's just, I'm conscious that young people really struggle sometimes with navigating the NHS and getting through the door. And it's now obviously the awful situation with your brother was that it was actually really hard to diagnose cancer as well. But actually, for me, it's about empowering people that actually, if there's a genuine worry that there is something serious like cancer going on, it's knowing the words to say to get through the barriers that sometimes the NHS puts in the way. And then the barriers aren't put in the way to stop people with genuine need getting through. They try to work out what's the right way to do with people. But, you know, checking health NHS websites for how to book appointments, using the NHS app to book appointments and get through, using the online stuff is really good to get through your GP surgery. Any of that stuff you talk about?
That's so interesting, because I was talking to Darren about this very recently, and we were talking about how we can navigate that a bit better as a charity, because part of what we do to the over 16s is talk about, just, have any of you actually talked to a doctor before or booked an appointment? Because they haven't. Mum and dad do everything. But if you find something you're embarrassed about, perhaps you don't. So, you know, okay, you call them up. You can say, it's private. I don't have to tell anyone. Because the first question you can get a GP surgery is quite often, what's wrong? And as a 16-year-old, you might not want to tell the lady at the end of the phone or the gentleman that, something's wrong with my testicles. You probably just want to say it's private. They don't ask any questions, and then they'll probably find a doctor that's suitable for that. Yeah. And then it's about, you can take a chaperone, you can take someone with you, and that's okay. They can be in the room or they can wait outside, just so you feel comfortable. Again, it's just those little life lessons that the feedback we've got is invaluable in helping just nudge people across the line, because all those little micro barriers are a point where someone could stop along that journey.
Absolutely.
And that could cost a life.
Yeah,
That's
and that,
really it's really interesting, isn't it? And I just wanted to ask you, Toby, you know, like when it comes with breast cancer, you know, people always think, well, you're looking for a breast lump, but actually, as the good doctor here knows, you know, it's changes in breast size. It could be a
Absolutely.
discharge from the nipple. It could be just a change in color of a part of a breast that might be a worrying sign. It might be nothing. But let's just talk turkey here, right? When you're telling guys in your Talking Bollocks tour, what is it that you should be looking for? Because it's probably more complex than just looking for a lump, right?
Yeah, it's the ultimate is anything not normal for you, but you have to have a baseline for that. So that's why we advocate for regular checks to get your baseline. We all say it's like when you're putting on weight, you might not necessarily know when you look in the mirror every single day. So if you looked in the mirror once a month, you might notice a difference. So it's the same with your testicles. So you're having a check. Um, Cancer doesn't usually will not work symmetrically. So if you've got something in one and not in the other, and that's not normal for you, that definitely needs to be looked at. So lumps is the most common. And again, we have some really good prosthetic pairs that tell people what a lump would feel like, because it's not always like a giant pea-sized. People are expecting like a
Yeah.
big lump. It's, you know, you need to get to know your testicles the same way you do any other part of your body. It's looking out for the epididymis. That could be a bit tender. It's swelling. You know, it's very common for one to be slightly bigger than the other, and everyone's a slightly different shapes and sizes. But if one's swollen significantly over a short period of time, go and get it checked out. Heaviness is another one. Survivors often talk of this dragging sensation, like the testicles are being dragged downwards and behind them all day. Pain is an obvious indicator that is something is wrong. And then hardness, you know, they shouldn't be rock hard like a pebble. You obviously don't want to squeeze them. We all know that, but they shouldn't be rock hard. So it's just getting to know them and just making sure you take very swift action, because it is, as Helen will say, absolutely nothing to a doctor having a check.
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's the thing, isn't it? A lot of me, I was interested you were talking there about how you talk to the receptionist, et cetera, because, you know, I think there is that fear that, oh, well, the GP won't want to feel my balls. But, you know, I'm pretty sure, Helen, that you've felt a few over the years.
oh, just a few, Steve. I mean, yeah, I did many, and it's just part of the job, just in the same way looking in somebody's ears or looking at the ball, you know, looking at a growth on your foot. I mean, that's just part of the job. Bodies are what we do. And we're almost invariably, you can't surprise, shock, or upset your GP. Okay, so there's that.
Yeah.
And people can, and some people, some men, boys and men would prefer to see a female GP, and some would prefer to see a man, and that's about preference. And don't be afraid to express a preference. It may not always be possible to provide it, but we're all pretty well trained in the UK, despite what some of the newspapers will say about general practice. We're trained to a very high standard and well used to examining. Um, but the big thing for me, what I'm listening out for when somebody comes in, is it's something has changed, because I don't know what's normal for you. I don't
Yeah.
know that the right one's always been bigger than your left one. You have to tell me that. So if I totally agree with this point about get to know your own is super important, Toby. So thank you for empowering people with that. Any sort of hints and tips you're putting through about ovarian cancer before we wrap up?
Again, it's not only is it close to my heart, by the way, because of what we do anyway, but I just this morning dropped my mum off for her ovarian cancer surgery. She's going through treatment at the moment, so this is something very, very close to my heart.
Oh my gosh.
So it's listen to your body. It's, you know it best. Ovarian cancer is very, very difficult. You know, 60% of cases caught at A&E because
Yeah.
symptoms are so rare. And my mum has shared this story. I'm not sharing on her behalf, but we run a charity. We know all the signs and symptoms. My mum is very, very symptom aware. She was just asymptomatic until she had pain, and then she was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. So the best thing is just listen to your body. Take notes of anything that's changing. You know, is anything persistent, new, frequent, unusual? It's abnormal bleeding, swelling, feeling full, peeing more, and again, pain. And unfortunately, Helen, you can speak to this better than I can, but those things in silo aren't necessarily outside of, a monthly cycle or remit for a lot of people. But it's just being very acutely aware of your bodies and being symptoms aware, and being empowered to go to the doctors as soon as you think something is wrong. We all have that little sixth sense. We know it, and we know it when we're ignoring it, I think. So the earlier, the better, always.
So let me first of all say, from both Steve and I, sending your mum all our love and good wishes,
you.
because it's a really difficult time. We absolutely get that. I did some of the original research. I was involved in interviewing GPs about women presenting with ovarian cancer and not. And that was where some of the symptoms where bloating came out as being part of the package.
Yeah.
This sixth sense is a very real thing. It's a sixth sense that clinicians have, the doctors have, and it's better when doctors know their patients. So this issue about continuity of care of GPs actually really helps. But certainly for patients, I mean, I had a dear friend with a different type of cancer who she knew in her heart of hearts something wasn't right, but it was really hard to pin down. It was when she shared her sixth sense with me that I then nagged her into getting help. And probably she got diagnosed from an uncommon cancer a lot early because I nagged her into doing something. So it's a real thing. Toby, it's a huge privilege to speak with you. Thank you so much for coming on, especially when you've got so much going on with your family.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for anyone listening that's taking on these messages. That's the most important thing, right? Carry on these conversations, break down that stigma, and just be that person that nags other people, because we all need them in our lives.
Bless you, Toby. It's the robincancertrust.org is the website, and obviously on all the different socials and channels, and there's all that information that's on there. Well, just to finally, Toby, before you go, what would Rob be doing now? What would he be doing at this stage in his life?
Oh, he'd be probably running a business, super fit and healthy. I imagine he'd be the ultra marathon guy, little family running around. He'd be living his best life, I'm certain. So we just try and do that for him and do him proud.
Well, keep talking bollocks to all of you, Toby. We love it. Please do.
Yeah, we do it for a living. Well, I used to, and we now do it every fortnight on the podcast. Toby, God bless. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay in touch. Wow, blimey. Toby's a lovely guy, isn't he? But he sort of threw that one in there about his mum at the end, which was, gosh, that's hard.
Took us both by surprise, didn't it?
Yeah, that's hard. It's just dropped her off this morning. My goodness me. Yeah. Well, look, all the best to them. I mean, what a great charity, doing really interesting things, aren't they? Anyway, that was really good. As I said, the robincancertrust.org. Find them, find their top tips for staying well, and then if the worst happens, they can help you get through it with some of their advice based on experience. We're going to move on with the podcast and do this.
It's pod surgery time. Steve,
indeed,
it's back. Look, something different now. And not men's health related. I was really shocked to hear, well, it was actually last week, wasn't it, about the ransomware attack on NHS pathology services in London. So the NHS actually declared a critical incident, which is pretty serious and unprecedented, mostly affecting Guy's and St Thomas's in South London. I mean, did you pick up on this?
Yeah. And in many ways, it was sort of a success story, if you like, of the IT transformation that's gone on, in the sense that, bear with me because this sounds very oxymoron, is that they had to ask medical students if they'd come in and run results from one site to another, because they're obviously so reliant on that being transferred now electronically, which of course they should be. But because the ransomware attack had damaged their systems and caused system shutdown, they had to try and ask medical students to be physical runners. And that I really did pick up on the news. I mean, obviously it's during election campaigns, so it's been kicked around a little bit politically, but I guess the NHS is no different, Helen, to any organisation, is that it is susceptible to these cyber attacks and from bad actors, sometimes state actors, sometimes individuals.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know where the background as to where this has come from, but I do know that the chaos that's been caused is because, so this is a pathology software company, which is a bolt on to the NHS. So this isn't software that's owned by the NHS. It's not the NHS itself that's been held to a ransomware attack. It's a private company that has a contract with the NHS providing pathology handling services for the results that is used in this particular part of London. But it's had a big impact, not just on the big hospitals, but on GPs as well, because obviously GPs generate huge amounts, particularly of blood tests that get sent off to labs. The labs process, send the results back electronically. So you've got GPs who can't do drug monitoring. You've got operations that can't go ahead because we can't be sure that patients' kidney function, liver function is safe. We've got chemotherapy that can't be given because we don't know if it's safe to do so. It's been really difficult. So the testing can keep going, but the volume of it's reduced massively. And the communication, as you said, needing physical runners. I mean, that is a bit crazy, and it's dragging on still. And I've got hiccups.
You've got hiccups. They could have used Monty, actually. He'd have been very good. He'd be very good at running between hospitals.
Does he drool?
he would drool. This is not in question, but he would be quite quick at doing it.
Yeah, you see, drool on the lab reports. I mean, you don't want the idiot
Yeah.
to go running.
I mean, the other thing as well is that just, to introduce some humor into a serious sequence that we've had on the podcast, Monty is extremely familiar with his
you've
balls.
mentioned this before. He does.
Yeah.
He's
I
a
mean, like
groin
all
sniffer.
Labradors, he doesn't have an unfamiliarity problem.
Yeah.
Anyway, listen, we're recording this on Tuesday, the 11th of June. So today we've had the Conservatives launch their manifesto.
Yes.
Yesterday, I think the Liberal Democrats did theirs.
Yeah.
They were talking about expanding my sugar tax. Expanding it to what exactly? Because we did that on the drinks, and presumably they're talking about expanding the principle of the reformulation tax, which sounds sensible to me. And then, of course, the right to see a GP within 7 days.
Yeah.
I struggle with this, you see, Helen, because I'm concerned about the activist patient who decides their clinical priorities. At the end of the day, there's a triage for a reason in general practice, and an absolute right to have a sore shoulder seen is very different to an absolute right having a need to discuss a breast lump, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really difficult. And of course, you really need to see the detail, because when I first heard a right to see a GP within 7 days, I mean, do they mean a general practitioner or do they mean a healthcare professional within a
Exactly.
surgery? Huge difference, huge difference. Do they mean an untriaged, unfettered, as in I decide what matters, or the right to have a conversation with somebody to sort of triage and assess those sort of things? I do think for urgent things, people should absolutely have the right to be seen and sorted within a couple. Actually, I don't want it to be 7 days. I want it to be more like 48 hours if you were really unwell. But I do think that the headlines, I think, are distracting from what is, I'm sure, a well-intended pledge. But I haven't had a chance to dig behind that very much. But I have to say, Daisy Cooper is very articulate, and so I'm fairly certain that there will be good meat behind this.
She'll have thought it through, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
and then of course the Prime Minister's announced the Conservative manifesto today. I mean, talking about continue to increase NHS spending above inflation in each year of the next Parliament. Big expansion of Pharmacy First. Now, we've talked about Pharmacy First a lot, haven't we? We've talked about extending the areas that it's responsible for. We're talking about in the manifesto extending it to menopause support, contraception, and treatment for chest infections. So sort of pushing on with that, and actually quite a massive extension in about 10-fold increase in the budget for Pharmacy First. So I thought that was interesting. The bit that caught my eye that you may be interested in is build or modernize 250 GP surgeries.
Hurrah.
Focused on areas of new housing growth. Now, this will be music to the ears of a lot of MPs who've raised this in the Commons, but of course staffing will be the challenge of it, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really important. So I'm sure, again, I haven't yet read the detail of it like you. I've just seen the headlines, but I'm assuming this is going to be using the Community Improvement Levy. So when new developments are created, housing developments, developers have to pay, I think it's 6% tax, money which is put aside to develop the communities that will serve the populations that are going to move into them. It has been notoriously difficult to get that money into action, to actually see surgeries built or transport infrastructure improved. And there's a real tension about it. So if anything can be done to get that money moving, that would be amazing. I know in my own practice, we've bid for monies to do stuff because Lichfield, where I practice, is a high growth area in terms of new housing development. And the patient participation group in my own practice are incandescent about this and have written repeatedly to local councillors, MPs, and so on. Anyway, that is a good thing from my point of view. The challenge we've got in the NHS with general practice is that premises for GPs are not all NHS owned. Many are owned by GPs themselves. Some are owned by private companies. I was led to see an expansion in proper NHS property, which is owned and managed centrally, which takes away a lot of the legacy issues when you have newer GPs coming through don't necessarily want to take out additional mortgages and burden themselves with it. I mean, in my situation, we've got one main NHS health centre, but we have bought a couple of properties over the years to run additional services out of. So, we've got a couple of mortgages running that the partners have to carry. Actually, it's fine. They're not big mortgages nowadays, but newer doctors come in and go, you've got mortgages. Anyway, that's a side thing. So that's a good thing to see tackled. Not a
that's in there.
Not
I mean, look,
glamorous,
there's a lot more in there. I mean, Labour are going to release their manifesto later on this week, so we'll have another podcast before the election.
Yeah.
And I think what we should probably do is have a study of these, all the three, or maybe the four party manifestos, then we have a bit
Next
more
time.
talk in detail when we don't have a guest, and look at what they're offering on prevention. Because I'm scanned the Conservative manifesto and I can't see the word prevention, but I'm going to need to do a control F and see if I'm missing something. I hope I am.
Just to throw in about Labour, you're right. Their manifesto's due out after we release the podcast.
Yeah.
But we do know some things so far, because Wes Streeting did a media round on Tuesday morning, and there was a comment about banning high caffeine drink sales to under 16. So this goes further than what's already been done by the Conservative government, who introduced a voluntary code of conduct for this, which the big supermarkets adhere to, but corner shops don't. So I think that's a good thing. And there was a comment about 100,000 more dental appointments for children. So I think, again, that was trying to sort of tease us with some of the things that are coming.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, as you know, I did the consultation on the banning of the energy drinks to children, and then the government never followed it through. And so it would follow, a Labour government will pick it up if that's what happens after the election. And, that's the Conservatives' fault for not following it through. Some of us did make that point. Anyway,
Wrap up.
Yeah, we better wrap up, I suppose. It's been an eventful podcast. Really interesting.
Happy Men's Week.
Yeah, happy Men's Week. Yes, I have a male dog sitting under my desk, as already mentioned. Oh, bless him. I know he's enjoying. He's still enjoying having Daddy home. We have football training tonight. Lads v Dads.
Oh, that'll be fun. Don't injure yourself, Steve.
Well, no, but you know how, we talked about me leaving Parliament and wanting to spend more time with the kids. And you know what, Ellen, for 5 years, they've had Lads v Dads training at the end of the season. And my boy has always said, will you come, Dad? And I've always had to say no, because I'm stuck in London voting. And tonight he said at the match last weekend, my dad's coming to Lads v Dads. I didn't know about this at the time, but I did now. And so, yes, that's what we're doing tonight. So I will no doubt be hopeless and fat and hobbly, but I'm going to be there, and I think it means the world to him.
With your son, that is wonderful.
And
but remember what I said. Be careful, Steve. You're not trained up at the moment. You can become match fit, but it won't happen in one game, one training session.
Thank you, Doctor. Right, podcast at stevebryan.com. Find us on socials. Give us your feedback. Please do check out the Robbing Cancer Trust online. A really interesting charity that I think we're going to stay in touch with as a podcast. And I'll see you next time, Helen.
Bye.